Welcome to the After Chat. I'm Michael.
I'm Ellis.
And today we are going to be talking about Jesus.
Yeah.
And who he is.
Mm-hmm.
You ready?
I'm ready.
Let's do it.
Welcome to the After Chat. Real questions. Real talk. Real life.
All right, brother. If you could design your own amusement park ride and name it, what would it be?
Oh, jeez. All right. Well, it would be a roller coaster. I love roller coasters. Mm-hmm. The more like flips and loops and all that stuff, like the better. So all of that, put it in there. I'm not good at naming stuff, especially not on the spot. I'd probably go with something generic like supersonic or something.
You go.
Make it like really cool, really fast. I would be happy with it.
Yeah, I don't know what I would call it, but I got an idea.
Okay.
Like I want some sort of like water slide component in this thing with some sort of ramp at the end that just launches you into the sky and then you just land in a giant pool. Like something
Sick.
like that, but I don't know what I would call it. Like double whammy twist flip.
That sounds awesome.
Maybe. That might be a mouthful.
Are we talking like a raft thing or like a float, or you're just sliding?
You're just sliding right off. Like no little rubber mat situation.
Mm-hmm.
Like I love water slides. Like water country, like that's my jam.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I'm going something in that vein.
Sick.
But I want to flip, but I don't know how one would actually go about putting a flip in there. It just seems like a nightmare.
Seems like
like
physics.
Gravity.
I don't know.
Gravity.
Yeah, there you go.
So like, who knew?
Yeah.
You know, you're gonna get up and then just. But no, like some sort of loop-de-loo deal, and then at the end you're just kind of catapulted into the sky.
Yeah.
Like I think that would be cool.
Our assignment wasn't to figure out how it could work, just to
design
come up with the idea
and give it a name. So double whammy twist flip. Supersonic.
There you go. Send it to the science
Somebody's
department.
going to hit it up.
Yeah.
I like this one. If you could attend any fictional school or university, what would it be?
Hogwarts all day.
Yeah.
This might be the easiest, like, get to know you question we've ever done for me. This Hogwarts, 100%.
So many bad things happen at that school. Like I would never send my kid to Hogwarts. Like the owl would come and leave the invitation. I'm like what was it? Harry Potter's uncle. Like I'm hiding those things all day.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, to like the featured characters, sure, but I'm sure there are like regular kids there who just they just get to do all the cool stuff.
Yes.
And none of the dangerous stuff.
Yeah.
So that would be me.
I could see that.
Yeah.
Like it could be cool, but the danger level's high. I think I'm going Bayside High.
Okay.
Like Saved by the Bell all day.
Yeah.
Safe, lighthearted hijinks. Everybody's home.
Solid.
Like
Good choice.
I think that's where I'm going.
Okay. Who did you think Jesus was before you were a Christian?
I mean, I had a caricature of Jesus. This is a laid back, kind of like a hippie kind of vein of a guy, just chilling in the desert with his Birkenstocks, just living life, like handing down some life lessons and some wisdom from time to time.
Yeah.
But other than that, just a very chill dude.
Yes. I think it was probably like a guy who had a magnificent beard that I couldn't possibly hope to ever grow. And yeah, wore sandals all the time. And had some wise things to say.
Yeah.
I think that was about the extent of it for me.
Just a cool, chill dude.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really who I thought he was.
Yeah.
But what was your favorite Jesus moment?
Okay, so I think this one's a little underrated, if you can say that about any Jesus moment. It's the moment where he first calls Simon to be one of his disciples, because he borrows Simon's boat to talk to the crowd.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, honestly, he really doesn't have to talk to Simon after that. Like, he got what he needed, the boat. He there's no reason for him to continue talking to Simon. He could keep walking to whatever he was going to do next, but he doesn't. He really sees Simon, takes the time, sees Simon as a person, helps him catch some fish, and then asks him to be his father. To me, that story has always stuck in my mind as everything that is Jesus. is encapsulated in that moment.
I don't know if I've got like one, but there's like a collection of things that I think kind of paint a really cool picture. So like when Jesus just went up and said, "Put down your nets and come follow me," and everybody's like, "Okay."
Good. Yep.
Like solid.
Yes,
like
sir.
So like there's a very charismatic like thing to him. So there was an attractional component. But then like Jesus was not afraid to be confrontational. Like
Yes.
y'all a bunch of brood of vipers. Like
That's a good one.
smoke. Like he's bringing it, you know? So like there was like those two sides of Jesus that I think that just present like a really cool picture. So both of those moments kind of taken together. Like, yo, let's go.
Yeah.
I'm going to teach you how to do some things. Sweet.
All right.
And then, like, if you kind of get in his face, he's going to come right back at you a little bit. So, like, I dig both of those things.
Yeah.
So, like, for this episode, we're gonna look at some cultural references to Jesus, just kind of like paint it get an idea of who he is, like in the wider culture, not just in the church, but elsewhere. Then we're also going to look at some Old Testament prophecies that kind of like gave people like a lowdown on the fact that a messianic figure was going to be coming, and how Jesus kind of filled those things. And then also we're going to look at some of the I ams, like who did Jesus say he is? Not just like who do we think he is, but like Jesus gave a series of I am statements to kind of flesh out who he actually is. So that's kind of where we're going to go. And Ellis, kick us off.
Yeah, so kind of like we did when we talked about David, we're going to look at like some cultural references and historical references to Jesus, because on an even bigger scale than with David, Jesus is everywhere.
Yes,
everywhere, like whether you're looking for it or not. So anyway, we'll start with the historical side of things.
And everybody has to take a stance on who Jesus is. Like even other world religions, like they all try to answer the question, who was Jesus? Right.
Yeah. So we'll start with some history. And I think this is the side of things where maybe not in a malicious way, just like this is where there's often like people looking for like proof that he didn't exist. If we could just spell it out, So one thing they might say is archaeological evidence of Jesus doesn't exist, but I mean, neither does evidence for anyone else who would have lived in Jesus's time. You think about like the time period, how long ago it was, the way they kind of lived their lives, their like kind of footprint on the earth. There's not a lot of evidence they would have left. So there's a first century Jewish historian named Flavius Josephus, which is an awesome name, first of all, before I say anything else.
Yes.
I don't know why I picture him with like a big Flava Flav clock. Just because.
Yes, like just a hype man. Like just gonna hit you with some history.
Yeah. Flavius Josephus. He wrote Jewish Antiquities, which is a 20-volume history of the Jewish people, written around 93 AD. He mentions Jesus in this book. He talks about an unlawful execution and identifies the victim as James, quote, brother of Jesus, who is called Messiah. And then in another thing he wrote called Testimonium Flavianum, he describes a man who did surprising deeds and was condemned to be crucified by Pilate. Pilate, who we've talked about before, the hand washer himself, as I refer to him.
Yes.
So, you fast
forward. I love that description. No, I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
Who did surprising deeds and then was condemned.
Yeah. Right.
Like, it's just a weird way of phrasing it. Like, what were those? Healed the people, did all sorts of amazing things. What do you get for his troubles? Condemned.
Yep. I think it's funny too, the first part on its own. A man who did surprising deeds could describe almost anyone.
Like that's such an umbrella term. It's almost meaningless.
Yep. So fast forward a little bit. This is around 116 AD. There's another guy, a Roman senator and historian named
Tacitus.
Thank you. He wrote something called Annals of Imperial Rome, and this is a quote from that writing. The persons commonly called Christians, who were hated for their enormities, Christus, the founder of the name, was put to death by Pontius Pilate, procurator of Judea. Shortly before Tacitus penned this account of Jesus, a Roman governor named Pliny the Younger wrote to Emperor Trajan that early Christians would, quote, sing hymns to Christ as to God. So all this to say, Jesus was known by historians and written about by historians who really had no, like, for some of them at least, they had no reason to look into his existence and dig into it or include it in their works.
And they weren't writing it to prove one way or the other.
Right.
Like, they're just saying, this is a history book. Like,
Here's
it's basically a text. Like,
Right.
you want to know what happened in this part of the world during this time frame? This is what happened.
Yeah.
So he was already clearly being worshipped and thought of as a divine figure.
Right.
Way back in the day.
Mm-hmm. So you fast forward to today, and you can kind of see references to Jesus or themes about him in virtually every facet of our culture. A big one being movies and TV. You have stuff like, the Passion of the Christ is an obvious one, but stuff like the Da Vinci Code, even Talladega Nights.
Yes, like they talk about which Jesus they like the best.
Yeah.
Like 8 pound, 6 ounce newborn infant Jesus.
Right.
All omnipotent with your balled up fist.
And then you just have direct adaptations like The Chosen or the Bible, the History Channel series.
Yeah.
On top of that, you have Jesus figures in all kinds of literature, movies, TV, things like that. You have Superman, Optimus Prime, Anakin Skywalker, Aslan from the Chronicles of Narnia, Gandalf. Basically, anybody who kind of falls into that chosen one savior / dies and comes back kind of thing, like that. A lot of those. Some of the ones I just named are just straight up direct references to Jesus.
I think what that speaks to is the fact that there's something in us that longs for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like that's part of like something which some people would refer to as like your soul crying out for something that can't be met here.
Right.
And Jesus came to fill that void.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was God taking it upon himself to say, listen, I know that there's something in you that's calling out for a savior. I am that.
Right. Yeah. And I think, I just named a couple of kind of different facets, but it's everywhere. It's in music, it's in art.
Yes.
We could sit here for I don't know how long and kind of go down the list. So, yeah.
And next, let's kind of just look at some of the Old Testament prophecy that spoke to a messianic figure that was going to be coming. Now, I picked like 4, but there's a lot more than that. But just in the interest of like just brevity, we're going to look at just a couple of them. One, that Jesus was going to be born of the Davidic line. This is King David, who we've got an excellent episode, King David Part 2, called I Messed Up, that I think everybody should take a look at. But it's our lowest watched episode. Like we gotta at least acknowledge it.
Go back and check it out. It's good, okay? Y'all were there for part 1. Anyways, all right. Go ahead.
So, 2 Samuel 7:11, also awesome. 11 through 13. The Lord declares to you that the Lord himself will establish a house for you when your days are over and you rest with your ancestors. So when you're dead for a long time, David, I will raise up your offspring to succeed you, your own flesh and blood, and I will establish his kingdom. He is the one who will build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. So this, and the writers of the New Testament, Matthew specifically, went through great lengths to prove, like, because he was writing primarily to the Jewish audience there, that this is the guy. Like, Jesus was that guy. And so that's just a fulfillment of that. The next one, that Jesus was going to be born in Bethlehem. This comes from Micah 5:2. But you, Bethlehem, though you are small among the clans of Judah, out of you will come for me one who will be ruler over Israel, whose origins are from of old and ancient times. Like, the origins of Jesus go way back, is what he's getting at here. And he's going to be born in Bethlehem. And so when the Magi came, they went to Herod's house and said, hey, we saw the sign, where's he being born at? Like, they went back through, read the scrolls, and you can read about that in Matthew 2. So, like, that was something that was already known. The Messiah was going to be born in Bethlehem, which is where David was born. And so we're linking things. Another one, Jesus riding a donkey in, like, the triumphal entry, like to Passover in Jerusalem. This is Zechariah 9:9. Rejoice greatly, daughter Zion. Shout, daughter Jerusalem. See, your king comes to you, righteous and victorious, lowly and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. Just to make sure that it's clear, it's a baby donkey, and one that's never been ridden before. Now in Matthew 21, we see that fulfilled, and this is so cool because Jesus is like tells them where to go and get it. Like he just tells a couple of his fellas, go to the village ahead of you, and at once you will find a donkey tied there with her colt by her. Untie them and bring them to me. If anyone says anything to you, tell them that the Lord needs them, and he will send them right away. So those are just a few of the prophecies that pertained to Jesus. Like I said, there's a whole lot more out there, but just for the interest of brevity, these are the ones that early readers of the New Testament stuff would be like, that's the guy. Mm-hmm. So, and just to kind of set up where we're going for the rest of the conversation, check out this clip.
Everybody at our church, everybody in the sound of my voice is trying to define God or improve our definition of God, wrap our mind around God, grasp God, describe God. And that includes people who are just exploring the idea of God. Maybe you're not so sure about God. And then it includes people like me, who have been, I counted myself a person of faith for a long time. Maybe that's the camp you find yourself in. But all of us are trying to take another step to understand God better. And it turns out that Jesus actually defines God for us, not just with the way he lived his life and the example he gave to us, but also directly with his words. He did it 7 times. 7 times in the Bible, Jesus uses an I am statement to define who he really is. And in case you don't know, Jesus and God go together. They are the same. Jesus, God in human form, because there was no way we could wrap our mind around who God was, but in the person of Jesus, we can understand him better.
So, as Brian said, Jesus made 7 I am statements to kind of define aspects of his identity and who he was. The original I am, though, comes much earlier, before Jesus walked the earth, in Exodus 3. And as we've talked about a little bit in previous episodes, Moses gets called by God, but he consistently doubts his own ability to specifically speak to the people and be able to lead them well. And so this is in Exodus 3, starting in verse 13. Moses protested, "If I go to the people of Israel and tell them, the God of your ancestors has sent me to you, they will ask me, what is his name? Then what should I tell them?" God replied to Moses, "I am who I am. Say this to the people of Israel, I am has sent me to you."
And what's like, so one of all the Egyptians had a whole cadre of gods that they worshipped, and they would often tattoo their god's name on their bodies and things like that. And so him saying that was just I am forever, I am self-sustaining, I forever was, all of those things. That's kind of what that meant. And Jesus used it in relation to himself and nearly got stoned for his troubles. And we and John 8, 58 and 59, they was kind of wondering who he was, who's the real children of Abraham and all these things. And Jesus said to them, "Very truly I tell you," Jesus answered, "before Abraham was born, I am." So he was saying, I was there long before Abraham. Before Abraham I was there. I was forever existing. I'm forever self-sustaining, all of those things. And then in verse 59, at this, they picked up stones to stone him, but Jesus hid himself, slipping away from the temple grounds. I often wonder you get that a couple times in the Bible. Jesus slipped away. Yeah. What did that look like? I imagine, have you ever played Assassin's Creed?
Yeah.
Where you're running and then you just hide amongst some other people and you just kind of walk like a monk?
Yeah.
Was that it? I don't know, but it just, I've always been curious as to what that phrase means.
It worked.
Yeah.
whatever it was. I mean, it worked on a number of occasions. So.
And so when we look at these, I am statements with that in mind, that I'm everlasting, self-sustaining, life-giving, all of those things, these I am statements start to make a little more sense, and you can kind of start thinking of them a little bit differently. So for this one, for I am the bread of life, John 6:35, there we read, "Then Jesus declared, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty." Here he's kind of likening him, because they were asking for a sign. And they kind of referenced how God sent manna to the Israelites whenever they was in the wilderness. And so he's kind of likening himself to that there whenever they asked him for that. Because like manna was a daily miracle that provided like reassurance that God was with them, but also provided like a physical, need for them. And so, Jesus is telling them that the only right way to satisfy the spiritual hunger that we all feel is through him. Like he's going to give that and provide us that spiritual nourishment, that everlasting life-giving thing. So I think he's speaking to that there.
Yeah. I think that's reference to in the Lord's Prayer. Give us this day our daily bread. So, it is very much like we'll receive from Jesus what we need for to get through each day. And the next day we'll be supplied with what we need for that day, and so on and so forth. So.
And you also get that in, communion.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You're taking in the bread, like the bread of life from him there.
Yeah. Cool. Well, the next one, all of these are out of John, correct?
Every single one of them.
Hey, shout out John for recording all 7 I am statements. So the next one is light of the world. This comes out of John chapter 8, verse 12. It says, when Jesus spoke again to the people, he said, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. I think it's in Psalms that it says, your word is a lamp to my feet, right? So this is like Jesus kind of saying, he lights the way. He shows you the way to walk in your life. And people who don't know him, they might have a hard time finding that way.
Yes. And it's also in that vein of like light being like a symbol of truth. Like Jesus is the ultimate truth. Like everything that he says you can count on to be true.
Yeah.
So I think it also kind of fits in there as well.
Yeah.
Now the next one, it's a little bit lengthier of a piece. So stick with John 10 is where verses 1 through 10. So very truly, I tell you, Pharisees, anyone who does not enter the sheep pen by the gate, but climbs in by some other way, is a thief and a robber. Burn. The one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep listen to his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes on ahead of them, and his sheep follow him because they know his voice. But they will never follow a stranger. In fact, they will run away from him because they do not recognize the stranger's voice. And I love how then John interjects here. Jesus used this figure of speech, but the Pharisees did not understand what he was telling them. And so, therefore, Jesus said again, like he's really going to drive this home. Very truly, I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who have come before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep have not listened to them. Talking about all before him, like there was a new Messiah, like on the reg. Like someone would pop up, say they was that, and then they would eventually fade away. I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. They will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. Jesus is basically saying here, I am the access to God, and whoever comes through me will find salvation. Like that can be, a lot of people can say, well, that's too narrow. Like there should be all types of ways. Jesus created everybody. Like he gets to make that decision for himself. So here he's saying, if you want salvation, I am the only way to get it.
Yeah. The next one is the Good Shepherd. Which is a pretty famous one, I would say. Also in John 10.
Follows up right after that.
Yeah, exactly. Starting verse 14, I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep, and my sheep know me, just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep that are not of this sheep pen. I must bring them also. They too will listen to my voice, and there shall be one flock and one shepherd. So I think from this kind of comes the idea of Jesus leaving the one or leaving the 99 to find the one. So I had never really noticed kind of verse 16 and on from there. I have other sheep that are not of this sheep pen. I must bring them also. In other words, I have my sheep that I protect and guide, and I have sheep outside of this pen that I have to go and bring with me also.
Yeah, and I've always read that, and I don't know where you land on it, but I've always kind of read that as like we got like the chosen people, the Israelites, like that's who, like we've got these sheep here, but we've got other sheep. Like, we're about to throw this wide open,
Yeah.
and start bringing in everybody. And like, I've always kind of read it as that.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
And so the next one, the resurrection and the life. This is in John 11, starting at 23 through 26. Jesus said to her, talking about Martha, "Your brother will rise again," talking about Lazarus. Martha answered, "I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day." The Pharisees were right on that.
There you
if
go.
Remember our other episode? And Martha subscribed to that. Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life, and the one who believes in me will live even though they die, and whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this?" And she said yes, like she agreed to that. Now, whoever believes in him will have access to I've always taken this as like, whoever believes in him will have life to the fullest possible, way here on earth, but also an everlasting life on the other side. Like, he's demonstrating, like, I am the is claiming that he's the source of both, like both life and the resurrection. And he demonstrates it like a boss right there. Lazarus, come out.
Yeah.
And what does he do? He comes out.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, he's just full on flex over death right there.
Yeah. I think it's so cool. Like, I think basically anyone else walking around and saying stuff like this, people would be like, this guy, like, come on, are you serious? But like, in the most humble way possible.
Yes.
Jesus drops these, and it is so awesome. Like,
Yeah.
I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. I am the resurrection and life. Like, bro, like, oh my gosh, it's so hype.
Yes.
So it's awesome.
So and he backs it up. Like,
Yeah.
he demonstrates it right then and there.
Yeah, it's awesome. The next one is the way, the truth, and the life. This is out of John 14, starting right there in verse 1. "Do not let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. My Father's house has many rooms. If that were not so, would I have told you that I'm going to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, that you also may be where I am. You know the way to the place where I'm going." Thomas said to him, "Lord, we don't know where you're going, so how can we know the way?" Jesus answered, "I am the way, and the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me."
Swagger all
Yes.
over the place.
So much swag.
We don't know the way. I am the way.
That's one you hear a lot at funerals.
Yes.
Very much, expressing the idea that even when we pass on from this world, there's a place for us that's getting prepared for us before we ever get there. And I think it's cool as we kind of go through these, you can see how they start to overlap.
Yes.
And how Jesus, as he interacts with various people, kind of rephrases a lot of the same stuff, but repackages it in a different way so different people can understand it, which is pretty
Yes,
cool.
and I think, like, he's the message, he's the method, like, he's all the things all in one. Like, I am the way right here. And I think that's why going through these, like, in this order that we are, because we're just starting at the beginning of John and just working our way through.
Yeah.
And it really all culminates right here in the true vine. And this is in John 15. Jesus says, "I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes so that it will be even more fruitful. You are already clean because of the word I've spoken to you. Remain in me as I also remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. I am the vine, you are the branches," meaning his followers. "If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. If you do not remain in me, you are like a branch that is thrown away and withers. Such branches are picked up, thrown into the fire, and burned. If you remain in me and my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. This is to my Father's glory, that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples. As the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Now remain in my love. If you keep my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commands and remain in his love. I have told you this so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete." And so there he's like, Jesus is the vine and God the Father is the gardener. Like, the branches are the followers of Jesus. To bear fruit means to be a faithful follower of him. Like, if you remain a faithful follower of him, your life itself is going to bear fruit and glorify God. And the branches, and this is kind of all going into what we've been talking about. Like the branches, like us, followers of Jesus, draw our energy, our nutrients, our life-giving like sap that flows through the vine up through the branches and then bears fruit. Like all of that is from Jesus, the source of life itself, the joy, everything. Like it all just flows from Jesus into us as his followers. And I think that's how he caps off like all of those I am statements. I'm literally everything you need.
Yeah, that's awesome. Like you were saying before, when you look at all of these kind of in a list like this, you see like how Jesus is the kind of the guide and the source for us on a daily basis, but also he's the gate,
yes,
and the way, and at the end, here I am as well. It's kind of like in Revelation, where he says, "I'm the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end." It's pretty cool how, like I was saying a minute ago, how these are kind of isolated ways that he communicates this to people, but they also all work in tandem, which is the most Jesus thing I've ever heard.
And yes, and it all starts at the very beginning. Like whenever he first flexes on the Pharisees and the crowd and says, like, before Abraham I am. Like I've literally been there from the beginning. And then it just slowly builds. Like I'm the bread of life. Like, like we got a list here, like I'm the bread of life. He's the, everything that you need to have a full life. I'm the light of the world. He's literally like the truth of all things. He's the access for salvation through God. He's the good shepherd. Like he's going to rule over us, take care of us, make sure we have everything that we need. Has total control over life and death. He's the way, the truth, and life. Like he's the method, the message, all the things. And then ultimately, like he hits it off. I am literally everything you need. And it's awesome to see them kind of compound on top of one another, like there at the end.
Yeah.
So it ultimately, like all of this begs the question, like, who is Jesus to you today? Like, who do you believe Jesus is, and how do you get to know him?
Yeah. Just starting with who Jesus is to me today, I picked out a verse from the book of Isaiah that I really like. It's chapter 9, verse 6. For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders. He will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. If you've been to any kind of Christmas church service, Christmas production, you've probably heard that before. And I think, when you look at it from like a 1,000-foot view, you can see like, yeah, he's the Wonderful Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. And yes, all of those are true, but it's also, to me, it hits me like on a personal level too. Like he's my wonderful counselor.
Yes.
When I have things I'm going through or a big decision to make, I can go to him. He's my mighty God. When I need something to happen and there's no way for it to happen, I can go to him. And he's my everlasting Father. Like I'm his child, or my Prince of Peace when everything is chaotic and swirling around me. Like he is the source of the peace. I think that breaks it down for me perfectly. That's kind of this verse is one I have kind of playing in my brain a lot, and that's kind of how I relate to who Jesus is.
Yeah, and for me, it's always been I've always very much related to the vine. Like that was one of the first scriptures I read, and it was just like I started like kind of picturing that, like what that would look like, and how you just get that nonstop flow of energy that you can't access except through supernatural means. But there's right after that, Jesus hit something really, really deep, I think, for me. It's in 15, starting in verse 13. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command. I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I have called you friends, for everything that I have learned from my Father I've made known to you. He beats that point pretty hardcore. I am your friend. Like, I care about you. I love you. I'm willing to lay down my life for you. I am your friend. And so there's times where, like, that's the Jesus that I need. Like, the light, he's always there to give you exactly what you need to get through whatever it is that life throws at you. But I also dig Matthew 25:31. When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all of the angels with him, he will sit on his glorious throne. And you get a lot of that imagery in Revelation. Like, he's also our king.
Yeah.
And so I love both of those in tandem. because you are my friends if you do what I command. If you want to be your king's friend, you got to do what he commands. And so the only way to get to know what those things are is to actually spend time reading the Bible and getting to know Jesus.
Yes. Yeah. I was going to say, not to give the cliche church answer, but how do you get to know Jesus? Read his words.
Yes.
I mean, it's one thing to go through them and just kind of see what he said. Like, okay, let me find out what he said in its entirety. But I think it's another thing to kind of periodically go back through it, because when you do that, you'll start to see things you didn't see before, and aspects of them you didn't see before, and things you didn't notice, things that'll jump out to you. I think that's really cool. Another way I would say is just to create the time and space to just sit and reflect and hear from him. I think that particularly in our culture, that is just, we talk often, off camera, like it's just always something going on, always something playing on a screen or in our ears or whatever, and it's impossible to hear or discern anything when it's just a constant stream of other stuff going on.
And for me, like, you have to prioritize it.
Yeah.
I mean, I can always make time to do other things, but if you actually want to grow in your relationship with God and you want to know who Jesus is and how you can relate to him and what he offers you, there's no other way to do it than to actually sit down and study him. And like you said, as you go back and you do it more than once, as you grow in your relationship with God will reveal more of him to you through his word. Like it's a living Bible. Like, I mean, it really is. Like, it does sound like a cliche to say it that way, but I mean, it really is, because it's going to speak to you differently every time you go to it.
Yeah.
And so if you want Jesus to talk to you and you want to have that relationship and you want to get to know him, there's no better way and there's no other way than to actually sit down and read it.
I mean, that happened while I was sitting here today with the camera rolling.
Yeah.
Like with the Good Shepherd I am. I've read that a million times before, but that second part didn't jump out to me like it did until we were sitting here right now.
Yes, and I mean, and that's happened to both of us multiple times on this very thing, where we're sitting here, we're reading it, and we're like, actually, that's never really jumped out to me the way that it has than it is right now.
Right.
And then that takes where our conversation somewhere completely different. So it's true, it's real. The Bible will speak to you in different ways, and the best way to get to know Jesus, spend time in the Word and read about him and listen to his words and take them in.
Yeah. Well said.
This was good.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, so leave us a review. We'll send you a mug. We got a couple of them going out this week, so whenever you get yours, drop a picture in the Facebook group. We'd love to see it. Yeah. And we'll see you next week for another episode of The After Chat.
Thanks for joining us for The After Chat. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. To be the first to hear our next episode, be sure to hit the subscribe button and get notifications for new content. You can also follow us on social media on Instagram at PCC Wired and Facebook at Passion Community Church. For additional resources and links, check out the description. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time on The After Chat.